Hello everyone, I am the Weather Dude. Welcome back, and today we are going to be talking about Invest 98L that is forming out in the Atlantic and the probability that it could affect the United States as a tropical storm or maybe even a hurricane. Before I get started, however, be sure to like and subscribe as it does help my channel grow a ton, and we're just going to get started here. So here we have Invest 98L. Now, once again, I think it was a 90 before. Maybe it had dropped to an 80, not quite sure, but it is back to a 90% chance of development within the next 5 days. All right, it's a small but concentrated area of showers and thunderstorms. All right, it is redeveloping, and I haven't even read this National Hurricane Center text yet, and I was actually looking at it, and I kind of saw it was redeveloping, and I'll show you why in a minute. But I do agree it is redeveloping along a tropical wave that is located a few hundred miles southwest of the Cabo Verde Islands. Conditions will be conducive for development, and a tropical depression or storm is likely by Thursday or Friday while the system moves west at 10 to 15 miles per hour. And there's even a 60% chance, which is more than a 50-50, that it could form within the next 48 hours. All right, but more likely than not, it's going to be between 2 and 5 days. So, as you can see, it's going to be on that west-northwest path. All right, it does keep it pretty far south, right? Now, remember, this is kind of like your quote-unquote cone. It's really more like a formation area. So technically, according to the National Hurricane Center, it could go on the north side of that. It could go on the south side of that. Obviously, the further south it stays now, most likely the better chance it will have of getting closer to the United States. All right, because once it gets pretty far south to a certain point, it's kind of hard for it to really curve back to the north. But of course, we'll be watching it closely. Now, I was looking at, if you looked at this like maybe a day or two ago on the satellite, kind of looked like there was some convection around the center, right? And it's sort of lost that now. And by first look, you might think, okay, this thing's weakening, ain't got to worry about it. Not really. What I actually think is happening is that it's forming a new center. Because while I was watching the convection weaken down here over the past day or so, I also noticed that it's still going on today, that we see firing convection to the north of it, and even on its western side as well. Now, you can kind of see the center in here. Then it kind of tries to redevelop again in here, right? Or maybe a rotation down here that's now found in here. So it's kind of like, it's kind of finding itself a new center. Pretty sure we saw that with a recent system. Not sure if it was Peter, but we did see a recent system kind of, yeah, it was Peter actually. They had the National Hurricane Center, one of their advisories, it's a tropical depression now, but they had put out that Peter had found a new center that was just a little bit further to the south of what the original one was, and it still made its way to the north. But this one, I think, is finding a new center. It's redeveloping, and convection on the north side is pretty strong. But the convection to the south is going to be weakening and probably dissipating, and we'll watch for more to fire up on the north side, as that's where the new center may be found. If we look now at the track guidance, again, similar to the National Hurricane Center, maybe on the west, maybe even the southwest path, west-southwest, before making another curve to north and west. But probably a due west, and then more like a west-northwest movement, all right, towards the Caribbean islands. Again, not sure if it's going to be a direct hit for you guys yet. Honestly, my opinion right now is that it's going to probably pass north of you. And for most storms, when it passes north of the islands greatly like this, it probably means it's going to go out to sea. But that may not be the case, and I'll explain why as well. As you can see, the darker concentrated, like the slightly thicker colored models, I think these are like the global models. Like I do recognize CMC. I don't recognize, and then the NavGem I recognize too. I don't recognize too many other ones. But those more solid colored lines are like the global models, and the other ones are just other like ensembles mixed in there as well. But you can see some of them do take into the Caribbean, and just because, don't let these models fool you, just because they bring it north does not mean that these models think necessarily that's going to go out to sea. All right, and I'll explain that later on in the video as well. Although some models probably do think it's going to go out to sea right now, and that's okay. Current intensity is 25 knots, aka 30 miles per hour. If we look at the intensity guidance, again, pretty much a steady increase. Really, no models none of the models have anything weaker than a tropical storm. Matter of fact, most make it a hurricane. A couple even make it a major hurricane. All right, and most models have it at that tropical storm status. Most of them have it there by around hour 36. So 24 hours from now would be like tomorrow afternoon, so the afternoon of the 22nd. And then 12 hours after that would be around 2 a.m. So we're talking like maybe sometime during the day Thursday is when most of these models, they've been shifting around a little bit. At first it was like late Wednesday, early Thursday. Now we're thinking maybe Thursday, between Thursday and Friday. Of course, because it's when it's finding that new center, it's kind of delayed its strengthening a little bit. Kind of like similar to when a hurricane goes through an eye wall replacement cycle. It's a similar kind of effect. So if we look at the GFS here, all right, the ship's diagnostic message, you can see it's dealing with a little bit of shear right now as well, and I'll be showing you that. But it's forecast, according to the GFS, to drop off between hours 18 and 96. That's like the next 24 to 24 hours to 96 hours. That's like next day, upwards of 4 days out. And then maybe it goes back up a little bit again. But even so, when wind shear is less than 20 knots, the storm can make out okay. It does depend on the environment. Obviously, like the other factors like dry air and sea surface temperatures. But any shear to a storm of this magnitude can kind of hurt it. So we'll have to watch out for that. Water temperatures will be staying above 80 Fahrenheit, breaking 29 Celsius, maybe even over the next day or so. Heat content could be going up later on once it gets closer to the Caribbean. So we'll be watching out for that as well. Of course, we know that can spoof the system up pretty quickly. Now, I'm showing you the surface winds right now. Now, I like to look at this more just for like a representation with the colors. Don't necessarily, obsess over the exact wind speeds, because I can assure you the winds are probably stronger than what they show on here. But I just want to show you what's going to start to happen. All right, so this is Wednesday at 5 a.m. And at this point, it almost, according to the Euro, it could form a closed low right here where we now have winds wrapping all the way around it. And you can see the stronger winds, quote unquote, are on the north side of the system. But let me take it up. I'm going to be switching between altitudes a lot. So 5,000 feet, you can see that center remains the exact same spot, meaning that it's starting to become a little bit more stacked. And of course, winds are coming out the same direction on the north side of the system, of course, because we're up 5,000 feet. All right, and of course, except that they're stronger because we're going up in elevation. But if we want to find the wind shear, if we go up to 250 millibars, notice how the shear is pretty strong. There actually is a upper level center kind of up there a little bit, but there is some shear coming out of the northeast direction. And that spot where there's less shear is where our convection is located, because it's not getting blown off because there's no shear there. It's kind of protecting itself, but that's why you're starting to see the convection on the west side, because it's getting blown off to the west side of the system. All right, so we're going to keep advancing and kind of switching between altitudes here so you guys can see how this could progress. All right, and I kind of just want to do with the European model. We'll get to the other models. I just want to do with one on this website, because if not, it would take like at least an hour, and I don't want it to. So we're going to fast forward to Thursday at 11 a.m. Again, there's your center right there. We're back to surface. All right, and you see winds coming out of the north. And that yellow is like the 25 to 30. That's like over 30 mile per hour winds in that zone up there. But again, don't obsess over the speeds. Obsess more over the direction of the wind. Again, kind of pretty much wrapping around the system all the way. If you go up to 5,000 feet here, all right, again, look at that low. It's in the exact same spot. All right, so that shows you, like when I will show you the relative humidity maps earlier on in the hurricane season, how I would show you that the surface winds and the mid-level winds, like how those vertically stacked. That's what I'm showing here, just on a different website. Now, notice the winds up at 250 millibars, aka kind of like the wind shear, is a bit weaker. All right, so that would mean obviously a better strengthening environment potentially. All right, so let's go back to the surface. I'll get one more frame shot, and I want to start to switch to more maps here. So we're going to kind of fast forward to Saturday morning. All right, now at this point, the low is getting some pretty strong winds, and those winds of 30 miles an hour plus have wrapped around the entire system, northwest, east, south, whichever direction. All right, so I'm going to highlight where the surface low is. All right, 5,000 feet, low's in the same spot. That means it's stacked. And even at 250 millibars, even though it's not perfectly stacked, there is a upper levels low that's actually really, or upper level center, I should say, that's very close to being stacked to the other one. Right? Now, this doesn't mean you do see stronger winds. That doesn't mean they're shear, though, because these winds are wrapping around the system. So it's kind of like starting to protect itself a little bit. So it can start breathing. And when clouds grow this tall and we see winds forming, the winds are pretty much spinning in the same direction at 250 millibars, which is like the height of the jet stream almost. All right, the winds are pretty much spinning the same as they are at the surface. So those storms are really growing tall. All right, switching gears. Sea surface temperatures, 83 for where the storm is right now. As it continues on its track, kind of like in this direction, all right, plus or minus anything, 84-degree waters could be expected. If it passes north of the islands, 84, 85 if it actually happens to enter the Caribbean. Farther south, it's 86, but it's kind of avoiding that for right now. But between 83 and 85, which is pretty warm waters, it would be better for the system if it avoided the waters left over from Larry. of course, because that layer cooled down the ocean a little bit. But even those waters are starting to warm back up again. Okay, so wind shear as a whole in the tropical Atlantic has been a little bit below average, all right, which is definitely good, but that's just looking at it as a whole. If we look at the wind shear, all right, I'm going to switch colors here. So here we have our wind shear. Again, pretty much the storm is located right about here, where shear has decreased a few knots over the past 24 hours. All right, now whether it tracks in this direction, all right, or this direction, either way, either of those scenarios, all right, our low is pretty much located right about here, all right. Either way, I mean, you can see that it's tracking through blue, maybe green if at most, which is like pretty weak wind shear. Now, this could change over time. Keep that in mind. But Peter and Rose are both battling some shear, and 98L could in the future, unless Peter does sacrifice itself to the shear, and maybe it could actually weaken a little bit down the road. But again, this will change. But right now, where 98L is and the environment ahead of it looks pretty good in terms of a shear perspective, and from a sea surface temperature perspective as well. Dry air is the only little thing I'm worried about for the system. Maybe that's good for us, obviously, but if we look, there is a system over there, all right, and you can kind of see a little bit of dry air that's kind of ahead of it. It's not very strong, but again, for a system that's in its early stages, it could be harmful, all right, and we'll be, even if it does enter the Caribbean, there's a little dry air still there right now. So, I mean, unless the dry air weakens, like just looking at this from a still image perspective, either way it goes, I mean, 98L will have to deal with this at some point. All right, unless the dry air happens to weaken, which I don't find likely. And again, there's also some dry air kind of rushing in behind it. All right, and that's being pushed by the shear. That's why right now you saw there's a bunch of shear coming out of the northeast, like I showed you earlier. Well, that's blowing that dry air onto the system as well. So it's a little delayed developing. But I definitely think by the second half of this week, it could get something together, whether it be depression or storm. Precipitable water, actually, has come down a bit. All right, you can see a bunch of purples, all right, before, which is like 3+ inches of precipitable water, which both Peter and Rose are carrying with them. All right, now that's kind of weakened a little bit, maybe around 2.5 to 3 inches of precipitable water, because again, convection was going down because it's redeveloping its center. This will probably go back up eventually. But either way, a big surge of moisture as it continues on its westward track here. Also, some pretty intense precipitable water for the southeast. Now, again, when it says 3 inches of precipitable water, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get 3 inches of rain. You could. That's kind of like the max, not the max amount of rain you can get, but the max in a certain period of time, right? It's how much water the atmosphere is holding. And, of course, that can go up or down over time. But, again, it all depends on how much water the atmosphere is holding. All right, getting on to the models now. You got our GFS, Canadian, and European. Now, I have fast-forwarded because I wanted to zoom out to the entire Atlantic, but then the storm would look too small and you could barely see it. So instead, I zoomed in on the Western Atlantic so you can see the mainland United States and just fast forward it to when the storm comes within picture, which according to the GFS will be around 2 p.m. on Monday the 27th. So we're fast forwarding a little bit. Pretty strong system. I will say, a little spoiler alert, all models pretty much agree that it's going to be a pretty strong looking system wherever it may track, is what it looks right now. But these lines, here's little sticks that you see, those are the 200 millibar winds. So you can almost kind of like look at the shear at the same time, which is why I like this. And on these lines are the 500 millibar heights, which is, I mean, even though I actually do have that on a separate map, so you can see the colors a little bit better. But the lines are also the 500 millibar heights, so you can see the steering mechanisms as well. And, of course, the cyclonic vorticity signature. So GFS does actually bring it a bit farther to the north. And that's because that high is kind of over here instead of over top of it to the north. It's kind of to the east. Whatever high is really there. It's a pretty weak high. I could actually, it's off frame, so I can't really tell. But it's going to be pulling that system to the north over sea. But as you can see, kind of like what we have with Larry, again, expanding, growing system will definitely bring some waves to the east coast either way. All right, but it's not game over. We don't know it's going to do that yet. Because earlier runs, and it kind of books it to the, look at that cyclonic vorticity signature. That's really like intense. Not too often you see like dead whites on there. That's a pretty intense looking system there. All right, now, and again, you can see they're carrying over 2 to 3 inches of precipitable water. If you look at the general area of the system, right, you can kind of see, again, around 2 inches of precipitable water, but that, of course that will change. But earlier runs of the GFS were bringing it pretty close to the United States. I haven't seen one yet that does predict a landfall for the United States, but it's certainly a possibility. All right, so you can see, again, Okay, I was right. There is a little high pressure off to the east, though. It's not off to the north, it's the east. So that's going to kind of take this and kind of push it to the north. Also, there's another high pressure here, which is going to kind of be weird because this high will be accelerating it northward. This one will be giving it some northerly winds, pushing against it. So that will keep it away from the east coast, but kind of slow it down while another one's speeding it up. So it's going to be kind of a messy process if this does play out true. But if that high does park itself over the eastern U.S., you guys are safe. That'll steer it out to sea. Not safe from the waves and rip currents, assuming it gets close, but you will be safe from the direct impacts. All right, next, Canadian model. We're starting out when it comes into frame, which is 2 p.m. on Sunday the 26th this time. Now notice, between then and, what is this, like 48, 72 hours later, look how much stronger the storm got. I mean, it's perfectly round. We got very high cyclonic vorticity signatures. All right, now notice, we can only go out to about here. Now those last frames, it does move pretty far north, kind of like this, but a little bit further to the west and to the south than what the GFS had for sure. You can almost see like a trough digging down, so that's probably explaining. If you were to extend this, it would definitely be dragging it north. If you were to extend this out, I can't. You can see those black, see how like they're normally gray, but you can see like these black lines here. That means even stronger winds at 200 millibars, which is going to give it some shear and it's going to pull it northward. So it does keep it south, but if you were to extend this out, that trough is going to kind of dig down a 500 millibar trough and just kind of pick it up and drag it out. All right, again, maybe paralleling the East Coast, maybe not too many effects. But you can see that here on the 500 millibar. Look at that trough, that upper level trough that kind of digs down and will kind of pick up the low. Again, it won't show it yet, but and it will sort of they'll kind of like almost merge together, maybe give each other some energy. But either way, wind shear will be fed into the system. If this were to play out, it would probably turn into it kind of like what Odette became, like a gale force non-tropical low. But one model that's been consistently showing what it's about to show now and what's been getting my attention is the European model. Now, by this point, its storm is pretty strong. Again, you can see little gray lines here, but see those black? See how they kind of turn like a more solid black on the northeast side? That means it's getting some pretty strong winds on the northeast side. So the storm is growing, I would say, for sure. All right, you can still see, it's very hard to see, but you can see those black lines still forming around the system. Now, this pretty much has a head-on Puerto Rico landfall here. Now, this is as far out as it goes. And you can see this is Wednesday morning and this is Friday morning, so really not too much of a movement here, but it could pass just north of Puerto Rico. Now it limits its weakening, but if you were to continue this would probably pretty much be right on track for Florida, the southeast, or maybe even the Gulf of Mexico. All right, so Europeans been consistently showing that, and it's a little worrying. And again, you can see right here, and look at the high. It was to the east, right? Let me actually go back so you guys can see. See how the high is to the east? Look how the high kind of creeps along. It's like the storm stalker. It's like moving with it without it knowing almost. All right, so it's pushing that system along this way, and it's not allowing it to leave necessarily. All right, and obviously these oranges, they build into the east coast. Like if we see these oranges come down to here, then there's no chance it can go north. It has no choice but to go west. All right, so we'll be watching this. This is definitely a potential threat to the United States. This isn't a major threat yet. Definitely be keeping an eye on it. Thank you guys for watching. I am the Weather Dude signing off. Till next time, I'll catch you guys in the next video.